Five flat if you're famously digital.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Peace River Town Council Governance and Priorities Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, September 5th, 2023 at 5 p.m. CEO Miller, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the adoptions of minutes. So we have minutes in front of us from the Governance and Priorities meeting of June the 5th. There's any corrections to be made?
I'm sorry.
Anybody like to make a motion?
I'm sorry.
Councillor Good?
The minutes be accepted as presented.
Can we just pause for a moment? Can we get a motion to adopt the agenda first, please?
Too bad. Should we, you want to back that up? I'll move to adopt the agenda.
All in favor? We have another motion on the floor from Councillor Good to move the adoption of the minutes from June 5th, 2023 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting as presented. All in favor? That's carried. Any comments from the public? Not seeing any. Presentations is next on the agenda. We have a presentation from St. Paul's United Church, Kate Morrison and Crystal Owens. Just like to come up to the desk and turn the mic on and speak your name into the mic for the record.
Kate Morrison. Oops.
Kate Morrison.
And Crystal Owens.
Okay, so did everybody get our handout? Okay. So, I also have copies of our budget. If anyone is interested, I have them. I'm happy to give it to you now or later. So, as you know, St. Paul's United Church has been part of this community for many years, since 1914, 1915. In 1925, the then Presbyterian Church became part of the United Church of Canada. And the current building that you see, St. Paul's United Church, was built in 1953. And the church itself, it is a building that we are trying to revitalize. So the building is still used for Sunday services. We stream services, and we have 2 services a month that are in person, either a lay person or some other things that we do. And it is also available for sacred ceremonies, weddings, funerals, baptisms. So there is that core function that's still there. But we're trying to do some new things with the church. And we've had some success. We, for example, sorry, I'm blanking out here on the successes. Just going by memory.
Okay.
What successes have we had? Gosh.
Still managing to stay open, actually. Through COVID, we've had across Canada, there was over 35% of the United Churches of Canada shut down over COVID and will not reopen. So the fact that we're still open is definitely a success in its own. And the fact that we've been doing it for a while now without a minister, because that's also another hurdle that we're facing. Because of the dwindling numbers with United Churches across Canada, they're putting in hubs. So you have one minister for 5 or 6 churches. And that's just, it makes it harder, and it makes it not always as appealing for people wanting to come to church when you don't have that minister there all the time, and you can't forge that bond with a minister. But yeah, no, you can continue on.
So, like everything, churches evolve over time. And for our church, we want to carry on. We want to have the building continue to be used in the community because it's a beautiful building. I don't know if you've been in it, but it's a beautiful building with a large space that can be used for large events. Other than spiritual events, so it could be used for concerts. We are thinking of allowing other wholesome activities there, activities that support health, wellness, spirituality in whichever form speaks to the person that is seeking something spiritual. And so some of the things that we have tried already is we had a pet cafe in which people could bring their dogs. So we're going to try that again. That's not necessarily spiritual, but it's something that would be available for people in the winter when it's cold and they could come out, bring their animals, meet other people. We have a couple of coffee groups that meet. We're having a knitting group starting up. They're going to be knitting toques and knits and different things for people that need those things. And I'm just thinking what else we're doing. Well, I'm going to check my notes. We've had AA and Al-Anon as groups that use our facility for many, many years, and they are still continuing to use that. We were a site for the homeless shelter briefly. The community group, the Friends of the Ukraine, they have met in our church. We are bringing back the suppers, so we're working on having a fall supper. We have St. Patrick's Day tea. We've in the past had a Mother's Day tea and a Christmas tea, so we want to continue to do those things. But the long and the short of it is that we are financially not in a great place, and I've shared some numbers there in the handout. We're at a situation now where our expenses, which we have really cut back, we can't really cut them back anymore, but our expenses do exceed our revenues by about twice at the moment. And so this water bill is a big hit to us. So we are asking for a reprieve. We know that it's something that typically you would say no to, because other groups might come and say, well, we got a big water bill and can't you reduce our water bill? We're suggesting that in this case, we are in a hardship situation that we are actively seeking to get out of. And what we're asking for in this situation is for you to make an exception for us, but we are asking for you to figure out what it actually costs for this $2,500 water bill. And so the cost of processing that water and delivering it to us would be, water is unusual, and that the cost per unit is, once the capital costs are in place, that's why the water bill went up. And so once the capital costs are in place, the cost per unit is fairly low. So we're not asking for you to affect your budget. We're just asking for whatever excess revenue you would receive from this high water bill, which will be very difficult for us.
Just with that water bill too, like that was one thing that we've actually had probably the hardest time readjusting to, because at one point we only ever paid our consumption. So our water bills were between $8 and $10 a month. And then all of a sudden it jumped to $150 some a month. So then that was a big, when we are running constantly on a deficit, that's a huge, like this between the water bill. And so what had happened was our hot water tank burst, and we didn't know because there's not always somebody in the building every day. So it was a couple days before we realized it at the end of June and beginning of July. And then so the cost of replacing all of this and the hot water tank, and we actually got a heck of a deal on that as well, which was very much appreciated. But between all of that cost, that's close to probably what we make in 6 months. So that when we're working on about a 2-year timeline before we are out of money and we have to look at closing down the building, that just jumped our timeline by about 6 months. So that's where our struggle is right now. We don't want to have to close our building. We do want to keep it open for the community. We want to keep it open for more than just the fact that it's a church, right? But we do have to look at our dollars here. Unfortunately, as horrible as it sounds, when we did lose our minister, it was a little bit of a relief because that we're not paying a minister anymore. So financially, it was a bit of a relief, not so much on the other end of things. But we were able to kind of slow down a little bit because we weren't paying that large chunk of money to a minister. But now this was a big hit to our budget, and we will definitely have to readjust things. And then the other thing that is that if it does close, then it's another empty building sitting there. So I don't know what the options would be afterwards if it was to ever close.
We don't want to go down that road. We're asking you to
No.
help us. We know that regardless of your decision, it may or may not stay open, or, you know, that you giving us this reprieve is not going to make it so that all of a sudden we're financially viable.
Oh,
We
no.
recognize that. But it gives us a bit more time to try to do some things in order to raise revenue. For example, one of the things that I've started working on is applying for a grant so that we can offer a program teaching families how to cook food inexpensively. So we would offer some classes in which they'd learn a bit about budgeting and shopping and then cooking at the actual meals. So that's something we're applying to the United Church Foundation for. It's a matching grant. And the lady who has been working in town doing some other food stuff, she just did something at the library. She's really excited about working with us on that.
Unless there's questions or anything else, thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just looking at your handout here, it says unknown water consumption, dates, May, June, and July. How often was somebody in the church during those months as far as checking on the building itself?
There were people there, but we didn't know that the tank was leaking.
Like it was a slow leak. So yeah, we didn't notice for the longest time. And then when we got the water bill, and then there was actually something going on with one of the toilets in there. And so we got somebody in to look at it, and they went in through the furnace room and they're like, yeah, your water tank is gone. And so it was pretty much running in the hot water tank and out. So for your normal things of like flushing toilets and stuff like that, you never saw anything. It was when somebody was in the kitchen and running and using the hot water. That's when it got noticed. So that doesn't happen all the time. There was somebody in the building at least twice a week.
I think it was Mary Ford who actually noticed that we didn't have hot water.
Mhm.
Is there any other, well,
Sorry.
any other questions from council?
I was just gonna ask you what your average water bill was, but you kind of said 150, so that's sort of
Yeah.
that was the question that I had, so thank you.
Seeing no other questions, well, thank you very much for your presentation. And being this is a governance and priorities meeting, there will be no decision made today, but at a future council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving forward on the agenda, looks like we have no review of policy, bylaws and policies, no unfinished business. So item 1 under new business, emergency siren update with Director Mumford.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council requested information on the town's siren system. So there's 3 sirens located on the east side of town, one on the north end, just east of 98th Street at 84th Avenue, one on the roof of the fire hall tower, and one on the south end at the corner of 104th Avenue and 103rd Street. There are no sirens on the west side of town. At the time of installation, there was little residential developments on the west side. For many years, the sirens were tested by being rung each weekday at noon. Activation was from about the town office. The sirens are 1940s and 50s technology, and operating issues began arising in the 2000s and 2010s. The fire chief at the time had electricians look into the issue. They reported that the sirens were functional, but that there was connectivity issues. So the connectivity, communication was via TELUS phone line. TELUS investigated it, but said that it was old technology, that they wouldn't service it basically. When the town converted to the VoIP phone system, the issue of sirens was brought up at that time. But we're not aware of the results of those discussions. But as I said, the sirens are an old copper line, which TELUS no longer supports. Important to note, the sirens are not part of the town's emergency response plan. So in the event that we have an emergency, it's not like anyone's trying to activate the sirens and they're not testing. We phased that out. While we've not researched the cost of replacing the siren system with something more modern, it is anticipated that the cost of a siren system throughout the town would be quite expensive, as the town has a very large geographical footprint. Additionally, there would need to be extensive public awareness to educate the public as to what the sirens mean and how to respond. There are numerous modern ways in which the public can become informed in the event of an emergency, including Voyant Alert, Alberta Emergency Alert, radio, and social media. This allows for much more rapid conveyance of information to residents and visitors. The benefits of the siren are limited, as they simply give a warning noise with no information as to what the emergency situation is that is unfolding or how to safely respond. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions from council? Seeing none, there's a proposed motion in front of us that council accept the briefing note regarding the emergency siren update for information. Councillor Wojcik makes that motion. All in favor? And that is carried. Next on the agenda is preparing for the Alberta Municipalities Conference resolution and meeting, and this is CAO Miller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ford. So we just want to have a bit of a chat with council regarding the upcoming AM convention and what we could expect, and then just the conversations, subject items with the ministers. So to begin with, just want to remind council that there is a motion going forward, a resolution going forward by Town of Grimshaw, and Town of Peace River has seconded that motion, the resolution, sorry. So it's rural access to supports for addictions, homelessness, and mental health. So as outlined in the briefing, it does mean a couple of things. We will require a minimum one member of council to stay in attendance during the resolution session. In the event that there is somebody that speaks against the motion, then we will have an opportunity to once again speak for it and argue the position. So, sometime between now and the end of the month, before we attend, you'll need to decide upon that. And then we will just remind and sit again with, I imagine, the Councillor Wojcik that will stay to speak to that. We'll just kind of walk through the process with you one more time. And then if we just want to move then to the items that you would like to have discussed, so we can make sure we prepare briefing topics and memos on the right topics. So for Minister of Municipal Affairs, Minister McIver, we have a meeting scheduled. And basically we said we want to talk about all the topics that we want to talk about with all the other ministers. So again, it's just kind of open discussion here to make sure that we have everything of importance. So Minister of Public Safety, Minister Ellis, we want to talk again about the Peace River Correctional Center, their release practices and their hiring policies, talk about mental health and addiction, health services in rural areas, and addressing public safety concerns in rural communities. Is there anything under that particular minister you wanted us to focus on?
Like, other than those three, I would caution against even bringing more than three.
You're still solid with these three then?
You just dilute your ask, I think, if you go more than three, honestly.
So as long as we're still on, everybody agrees these are the three topics.
I think
to
those
move
are
forward.
Those are the three the three discussions that council spoke about before that they wanted to have at that meeting.
Then we've requested a ministers meeting with Minister of Senior Community Social Housing, Minister Nixon. We haven't received any word one way or the other. Should we be blessed with the opportunity to meet there? The two subjects that we put forward for discussion and council's agreement would be temporary and transitional housing initiatives, and then the low income transit subsidies for alternative transportation. So where they cut us out, we're looking for some funding for a taxi pass program. The next Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors, Minister Shane, we requested, we haven't yet received confirmation again on that meeting. Should we be so fortunate to get some time, we would be talking about the disaster mitigation. I imagine Pat's Creek, standardized transit for northern rural communities, and then east-west corridor initiatives. And I think maybe those came through the resolution of council a couple weeks ago, I think. Oh yeah, there it says right there. And then finally, again, we also have requested a meeting with our CMP Commanding Officer of K Division, Deputy Commissioner Zablocki, and topics for the Regional Police and Crisis Team Initiative, following up on last year's discussion. Concerns, of course, with our increased crime and homelessness counts, and then just general discussion and community safety. And those were also given to us by motion. So if there's any changes or anything else that you'd like to bring forward for us before we begin preparing.
Is there any concern, Councillor Good?
Just a comment, I think you've done a good job of actually keeping track of all the things we brought you, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for assisting us with this.
We have a great legislative services coordinator. She does a great job.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Boychuk?
So are we gonna work at exactly what we want to talk about here?
Kind of the concerns that council had before are basically in this memo, but prior to the meeting, you were talking about an item that I think should be brought up during this as it's directly related.
Right, yeah, so earlier I was just discussing, you know, gathering some concrete information as far as letters from the community that have been affected by these prisoner releases, businesses that have been affected by the prisoner releases, and anybody impacted by the amount of releases we've had in our community, and how we would go about that, whether it be a petition, a general ask, working through the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Board along that avenue as far as getting them involved. So yeah, it was just when we meet with these ministers, especially, you know, around the community safety, which has been a top priority, I think we need as much information to come up with a solution as quick as possible.
What would your suggestion be on how to gather that information? You just looking for letters or?
Yeah, well, that's what I was bringing forward to council is what's the best way. Do we want them to write to the town? Do we want to go and solicit them? Do we want to, you know, I honestly don't mind talking to every business on Main Street and in the downtown core myself. But that would take a long time, right, before the end of this month.
Councillor Good?
The only suggestion I'd make, and I think I'm only speaking of how I would have, because we're looking at a very narrow window here. Is I think the most efficient would be an online, there's any number of Google polls, whatever, you know, name, address, whatever, it comments, and then anybody could go there, and then the chamber could put it out that it's open for, we could do a Facebook post that it's open and get people to write in there, because any other way, you wouldn't have time to do a full analysis, collation and everything else. The one thing about doing it in either Microsoft Forms or something like that is that your survey's collated for you. It's all there. Everything you need is all in this thing. Here's what we had 300 responses or 250 or whatever the number is. Here's the number of people that are concerned. Here's what their concerns are. You're not editing it, you're not vetting it, you're not interfering with it. And that's the data that we need. But I don't see any, I honestly can't think of any other method that would get it there efficiently and quickly enough. Because even if you did it by hand, you're still gonna have to type it down and enter it somewhere. You may as well do it on the form.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. That's just my suggestion. You guys probably, I'll be honest with you, administration probably already thought of that before I mentioned it because
Councillor Scanlon, any comments or concerns?
Well, I know a number of people have written into the mayor as of recent, that she's been able to respond to, and those are things that we should bring in. We did not solicit these, letters, which is a little different from even soliciting responses, say that, look, people are writing in, and this is how it is. I was at the community play rehearsal the other day, and normally they open the door to the hall and leave it open so the kids can come and go, or if someone shows up late, and so now it's a case of, well, they'll have it open for the first 15 minutes and then lock it, because while the kids and the directors and everybody are down in the hall working, there's no one watching the door, and just the crowd in the area isn't one that you want to just leave things unlocked and have people wandering it out over. So it just changes how a lot of citizens that are going for walks, people using parks, people using facilities around. There's a lot that's changing around how people can interact with our services and with our facilities and parks and everything. And it's had an impact on a number of areas of quality of life, not just businesses and that kind of thing too. So I would like to see those other things included as well, and some of the other kind of anecdotes that people are having to deal with, if we can kind of get those too.
Thank you, Councillor Scanlon. CEO Miller, is there possibly a proposed motion that administration would like to see coming from this?
I do have one, actually. If a council would move to request that administration collect letters of concern from community members, businesses, and others affected for presentation to the minister during the upcoming meeting, then we'll work on that.
And would that also include Councillor Good's comments in regards to a possible doodle poll or something?
Because it isn't to collect information letters.
Would anybody care to make that motion?
yeah,
Councillor Good,
so moved.
all those in favor? And that motion is carried. Is there any other questions or concerns from council with regards to this briefing though? Councillor Wojcik?
One thing I would pay attention to, just like our strategic plan, is they've all been given mandate letters. And so if we can attack it using the language of the mandate letter and stuff like that, I think we'll get a lot further by asking them to stick to their actual plan and their mandate in that language.
Thank you, Councillor Wojcik. Ms. Parsons, is that good enough for a motion, or do you need a motion to accept for information as well? Okay, next on the agenda is reports, which I see we have none. Next would be council communications package. Is there anybody that would like to highlight anything out of the communications package? None. Okay, seeing none, key communication items.
I thought we moved to accept the items.
Oh, sorry about that.
Move to accept the items. Move to accept the items of information as presented.
Oh, we already have that motion for item 1 and item 2. We have the motion for
Well, I meant for, okay, move to accept the council communications package.
information.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? And that is carried. Key communication items.
The letters
Yeah.
will be seeking.
Is there, we have a number of counselors going to the AM conference. Is there a need? Maybe we can arrange this at the conference itself, or maybe ahead of time for us to, we get the briefing notes and the information before we go down there to kind of strategically plan our presentations here, like as opposed to kind of, we don't want to be going in and going at it.
Yes.
Or,
We'll get the briefing notes to you before the meetings, so you have opportunity to discuss them as a group, absolutely.
sure. That's emails.
Thank you. Anything else for key communication items? Not seeing any. Next on the agenda. There's nothing in closed session, so would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Counselor Boychuk, so moves to join to close the meeting. And we'll see you all next Monday. All in favor? That's carried.
They got a pay faction. And that's what we should get.
Yeah, well, just share it.